Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to Week of Wildlife Wisdom. Happy Ice Age Week, or it's better known as Ice Age Europe Week, but every time I do Ice Age Week, I like to try and include the whole world worth of animals. But yeah, it's going to be this week we're featuring 7 animals that lived throughout the last Ice Age. Starting with Megalochelys, which is a now extinct genus of giant tortoise, which lived throughout what is now Eurasia and Oceania, or is it Oceania? From the Miocene to the Pleistocene, around 7.2 million to 120,000 years ago. The genus Megalochelys was first named in 1837 by Hugh Falconer and Proby Cotley. I want to say that's how you pronounce the name. Based off of remains found in the Sivalik Hills in northern India, which they dubbed the species Megalochelys sylvanensis, meaning great turtle. However, later in 1844, Falconer and Cotley decided to rename the species Colossochelys atlas, as they considered the original name to not convey the sufficiently expressive idea of the size. During the late 19th century and much of the 20th century, Megalochelys/Colossochelys was considered synonymous with testudo, and later Geochelon. Colossochelys is now regarded as a junior synonym of Megalochelys, and 4 species are considered valid: Megalochelys atlas, Megalochelys cottleyi, Megalochelys margay, and Megalochelys sondari, with a possible additional 3 species yet to be formally named. And some authors have argued for the validity of Megalochelys sylvanensis. The size of Megalochelys varied considerably between species, and the shells of M. sondari reached around 2.4 to 3 feet or 70 to 90 centimeters across, whilst those of whilst those of the largest species, M. atlas, got upwards of 6.7 feet or 2 meters across, meaning that the largest Megalochelys could have gotten up to 9 feet or 2.7 meters long, 6.5 feet or 2 meters tall, and 4,400 pounds or 2,000 kilograms in weight. The shell of Megalochelys is prominently domed, comparatively thin. In life, Megalochelys would have inhabited jungles, dry forests, grasslands, and scrublands, where it fed upon grasses, sedges, fruits, leaves, and carrion. And next up is Thylacosmilus, which is an extinct genus of saber-toothed Megatherian mammals that inhabited South America from the late Miocene to the Pliocene epochs, some 9 to 2.5 million years ago. The first remains known of Thylacosmilus, consisting of 3 partial skeletons, were unearthed at the Itzango Formation of the Coral Queimado in the Catamarca province of northern Argentina. During the 1926 Marshall Field paleontological expeditions, these 3 specimens were recognized as representing a new type of marsupial related to the boar hyenids, and were reported to the Paleontological Society of America in 1928, though they were not named. In 1933, the American paleontologist Elmer S. Riggs named and preliminarily described the new genus Thylacosmilus. Based off of these specimens, he dubbed 2 new species in the genus, being T. atrox and T. lentus. The generic name Thylacosmilus means pouch knife, while the specific name atrox means cruel. Since then, several more fragmentary Thylacosmilus specimens have been recovered, and in 1972, Argentinian paleontologist Jorge Zetti suggests that T. atrox and T. lentus represent a single species. The American paleontologist Larry G. Marshall agreed in 1976, stating that the features distinguishing the 2 were most likely caused by being different growth stages and being different sexes. Additionally, the genus Acleistictis, known only from teeth, was found to be synonymous with Thylacosmilus, reaching around 59 to 70 inches or 150 to 178 centimeters in length, and 28 to 32 inches or 71 to 81 centimeters tall, and 180 to 330 pounds or 80 to 150 kilograms in weight. The Thylacosmilus would be comparable in size to a modern jaguar. Thylacosmilus had large, triangular, saber-like canines, which were anchored well into the skull to a degree not seen in other saber-toothed animals. Recent comparative biomechanical analysis have demonstrated that Thylacosmilus had a weak bite force, but a powerful neck and flexible forelimbs, and was more than capable of killing prey in a similar manner to saber-toothed cats. However, Thylacosmilus' unique dentition meant that it was incapable of feeding like one, and thus it has been suggested that Thylacosmilus had a rather unique feeding mechanism and may have been an organ specialist. In life, Thylacosmilus would have inhabited grasslands and forests of South America. Next up is Bos primigenius, better known as the Aurochs, is a now extinct species of bovine which is the wild ancestor of modern domestic cattle. First evolving in the Middle Pleistocene around 780,000 years ago, these cattle lived throughout much of Eurasia and Africa well into the Holocene. The Aurochs is further separated into four distinct subspecies: B.P. primigenius, or the Eurasian Aurochs; B.P. pneumaticus, or the Indian Aurochs; B.P. marichanicus, or the North African Aurochs; and B.P. thoraticus, or the dwarf Aurochs, which was an insular species, lived on the Greek island of Carythia. For millennia, the Aurochs held cultural importance to many communities around the globe, being depicted in Paleolithic cave paintings, Neolithic petroglyphs, ancient Egyptian reliefs, and Bronze Age figurines and paintings. It symbolized power, sexual potency, endurance, and prowess across various religions, and its horns were used as weapons, offerings, trophies, and drinking horns. Two Aurochs domestication events occurred during the Neolithic Revolution. One gave rise to domestic cattle, or Bos tauros, in the Fertile Crescent in the Near East around 10,500 years ago, which were later introduced to Europe via the Balkans and the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Another occurred in the Indus River Valley around 9,000 years ago and gave rise to the Sangha and Zebu lineages of domestic cattle. Additionally, a hybridization event between Zebu and early Taurine cattle occurred in the Near East around 4,000 years ago. In life, Aurochs inhabited forest, grasslands, wetlands, and mountainous regions. In winter, Aurochs formed large herds or broke into smaller herds during the summer. The mating season was in September, and calves were born in the spring, with cows reaching some 9 to 10 feet, or 2.74 to 3.05 meters in length, 4.5 to 5 feet, or 1.37 to 1.52 meters tall at the shoulder, and around 1,500 pounds or 680 kilograms in weight, and bulls reaching 10 to 12 feet or 3.05 to 3.66 meters long, 5 to 6 feet or 1.5 to 1.83 meters tall at the shoulder, and up to 3,310 pounds or 1,500 kilograms in weight. The proportions and body shape of the aurochs were strikingly different from many modern cattle breeds, with longer legs, larger heads, and stouter trunks. Unfortunately, a combination of overhunting, capturing herds for domestication, habitat loss, and competition from livestock slowly but steadily drove the aurochs to extinction, with the Indian aurochs going extinct around 1800 BCE, the African aurochs going extinct around 480, and the last known Eurasian aurochs holding out in Poland's, and I'm going to butcher this, Jack Toro forest until 1627. In the 1920s, during the first years of the Weimar Republic, the brothers Heinz and Lutz Heck independently started extensive breeding back programs to attempt to de-extinct the aurochs. Heinz was the director of the Hellebrunn Zoological Gardens in Munich, and Lutz was the director of the Berlin Zoological Gardens. Lutz primarily used Spanish fighting bulls for his program and ended up with creating a very large and hyper-aggressive breed, whilst Heinz used a combination of ancestral breeds such as the Corsican, the Highland, the Angelin, and the Hungarian Grey, and created a shorter, more resilient, and less temperamental animal. Lutz ended up partnering with the Nazis and releasing many of his cattle into the wild. However, his cattle were exterminated by the end of the Second World War. whilst Heinz didn't join the Nazis, and his breed persists to this day. There are considerable differences between het cattle and wild aurochs in build, height, and body proportions, and many critics and scientists agree that het cattle are more of a breed of domestic cattle than with aurochs traits than a true case of aurochs de-extinction. Starting in 1996, het cattle were crossed with southern European cattle breeds such as the Saigonese cattle, the China cattle, and the Spanish Fighting Bull, in a hope of creating a more aurochs-like animal. The resulting crossbreeds is called the Tortoise cattle. Next up is Megalochelys, better known as the giant Cuban owl or giant cursorial owl, is a giant now extinct relative of the modern burrowing owl, which lived throughout the Caribbean during the Pleistocene period some 126 to 11,000 years ago. The first known remains of Megalochelys, consisting of a subfossil postcranial remains collected from the Cueva de Pio Domingo, Pinar del Rio province of western Cuba, on the 2nd of January 1954 by members of the Sociedad Espeleological de Cuba. These were then named, described by the father of Cuban vertebrate paleontology, the late Oscar Arredondo, that same year, who, because of the size of the bones, believed them to be a forest rocket terror bird, giving the animal the name Megalochelys, meaning bird with gigantic claws, with the specific name Arredondii referring to himself. In 1961, Pierce Broadcorb reviewed the findings and identified them to have belonged to an owl, which he formally named Megalochelys oteroi, which was eventually adopted by Oscar Arredondo. Remains have been abundant throughout the island in Pleistocene-era cave deposits, and today at least 3 near-complete skeletons have been recovered. In the past, 3 additional species of Megalochelys besides oteroi were regarded as valid, those being Megalochelys minor, Megalochelys gigas, and Megalochelys acevindoi. However, a 2020 study concluded that these species were all synonymous with oteroi and described a new valid species, Megalochelys ewingi, from material formerly assigned to the prehistoric horned owl Bubo osvaldoi, reaching up to 3.7 or 1.1 meters tall and 20 to 30 pounds or 9 to 13.5 kilograms in weight. Megalochelys sported very long, powerfully built legs for its size. With a short tail, bulky body, and reduced wings, Megalochelys would have only been able to fly short distances, similar to modern turkeys or peafowl. It is then theorized that these owls would have been strong runners, which spent most of their time on the ground, hence their alternative name, cursorial. In life, the Cuban giant owl is believed to have preyed principally on large terrestrial vertebrates such as lizards, hutias, and smaller ground sloths. Next up is Encyclotherium, which is an extinct genus in the family Calicotheriidae, in the subfamily Schizotherinae, which lived throughout Europe, Asia, and Africa during the late Miocene to early Pleistocene period, some 11.6 to 1.8 million years ago. The first remains known to belong to Encyclotherium, consisting of a handful of hand bones, were unearthed from Miocene deposits near the Greek city of Kyrrasia by Gaudry and Lartet in 1856, and would be formally described by Gaudry in 1863, who named the creature Encyclotherium, meaning hook beast in Greek, a reference to the animal's claws. Since the initial discovery, dozens of remains have been recovered across 3 continents, and today at least 3 species are considered valid. A. pentelicum, A. hingini, and A. hellenicum. Members of the family Calicotheriidae were peculiar clawed perissodactyls, which were distantly related to modern horses, tapirs, donkeys, and rhinoceroses, yet had body plans very different from such creatures, and thus Calicotherids like any true modern analog. Reaching around 6.6 or 2 meters tall at the shoulder and 1,000 pounds or 455 kilograms in weight, Encyclotherium was a relatively large quadrupedal animal with 4 limbs substantially longer than its hind limbs. a broad chest, and a thick, elongated horse-like neck. Unlike horses, it had hand claws instead of hooves, but unlike Calocotheres, it walked on its palms instead of its knuckles. Encyclotherium had a large head, and at least some individuals of A. pentacellum or Pentelicum had a frontal bone of the skull inflated to form a small dome. In a classic example of convergent evolution, Encyclotherium and its kin developed feet which were structurally quite similar to those of extinct giant ground sloths, with their strong arms and clawed hands being great tools to both pull down branches, strip bark, open fruits and nuts, dig for roots, and defend themselves against predators. Encyclotherium was also distinct in that it seems to have been less reliant on forests for food, instead of being a mixed browser, feeding upon grasses and sedges as well as roots, tree, bark, shrubs, and leaves. Though it went extinct throughout Eurasia during the Miocene, in Africa it managed to persist well into the Pleistocene, making Encyclotherium one of the last surviving of the Calocotheres. And next up we have Castorides, better known as the giant beaver. It is an extinct genus of beaver that lived throughout North America during the Pleistocene to early Holocene, some 2.1 million to 11,000 years ago. The first remains of Castorides known to science, consisting of a skull, was unearthed from a peat bog near Nashport, Ohio in 1837 during the digging of the Ohio Canal. These remains would be formally described by American geologist John Wells Foster in 1838, who named the animal Castoroides, meaning beaver-like in Latin. Since then, hundreds of Castoroides specimens have been found from Alaska and Canada down to Florida, being especially concentrated around the Midwestern United States and the states near the Great Lakes, particularly Illinois and Indiana. Today, 2 species are considered valid: C. ohioensis and C. dilophytus, reaching some 6 to 7.5 feet or 1.8 to 2.3 meters in length and 170 to 275 pounds or 77 to 125 kilograms in weight. Castoroides was the largest known rodent in North America during the Pleistocene, the largest known beaver. The hind feet of the giant beaver were much larger than in modern beavers, whilst the hind legs were shorter. The tail was longer and may not have been paddle-shaped as in modern beavers. The shape of Castoroides' large incisors would have made it much less effective at cutting down trees than living beavers, meaning that it likely didn't build dams and lodges in a similar manner. In life, Castoroides would have been heavily reliant on lakes and wetlands, where it would avoid both predators and feed upon primarily aquatic plants. The remains of the giant beaver, along with human artifacts and the remains of other megafauna from several sites, shows that there is some interaction between Paleo-Indians and Castoroides, and many native tribes such as the Innu, the Mississaugan, the Algonquin, and the Anishinaabe, all feature giant beavers in their traditional mythology, which many believe is evidence of their ancestors interacting with Castoroides. And our final animal week is Mecosuchus, which is a genus of now extinct Mecosucha and crocodilian, which lived throughout what is now Australia, New Zealand, New Caledonia, and Vanuatu, and other Pacific islands from the Oligocene to the Holocene epoch, some 28 million to 300 AD. The first known fossils of Mecosuchus, consisting of a quadrojugal, a dentary, parts of the skull, and isolated vertebrae, were recovered from various different sites across New Caledonia in the early 1980s. These were given to Eric Buffetant in 1983, who, along with Jean-Christophe Balouet, properly described them in 1987. Due to the strange anatomy of the material, they initially assumed that the animal represented an early Eusuchian and placed in its own family Mecosuchinae. 10 years later, in 1997, a second species was described by Paul Willis in the River Slay World Heritage Area in Queensland, who named the animal M. whitehunterensis. Since then, several more specimens have been found, and today there are 4 confirmed species: M. whitehunterensis, M. sanderi, M. calpocasi, and M. inexpectus. Reaching around 3.3 to 6.7 feet or 1 to 2 meters in length, 15 to 66 pounds or 7 to 30 kilograms in weight, Microsuchus is amongst the smallest Microsuchines, and the skull of Microsuchus was notably short and raised rather than elongated and flattened as seen in most crocodilians. The neck was shortened but strong and flexible. The body was covered in a protective layer of osteoderms. The limbs were notable for being almost more like that of a monitor lizard than other crocodilians, suggesting that Microsuchus would have spent a lot more time on land and may have been capable of climbing rocks and trees. Some Microsuchus species have teeth designed for stabbing and slicing, whilst others have blunter, thicker teeth for crushing. In life, Microsuchus would have inhabited rainforests, swamps, woodlands, and coastal regions, where it fed upon birds, amphibians, small mammals, other reptiles, insects, crustaceans, and mollusks, particularly snails. As always, take care to my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Happy Ice Age Week.